Then, and only then, in a room that had been darkened for the ceremony, did they switch on the lights, always too many of them, always so magical, that she and her mom had gasped with delight, while her dad had grinned tolerantly. The same ceremony had been repeated at White Pines, whereas the oldest grandchild, she'd always been the one who'd put the angel on her grandfather's tree. So many wonderful traditions, she thought now. How could she have run away from all the warmth and love in that house? She wondered in retrospect. Rebellion, pure and simple. She had chafed at all the bright expectations and what she now suspected had been imagined pressures. Like all families, hers had only wanted what was best for her. It was just that the Adams men, particularly Luke and her grandfather, had a tendency to think they were the only ones who knew what was best. No two men on earth could be more mule-headed once they'd charted a course of action for themselves or someone they loved. Ironically, they had rarely agreed on what that course should be. One plan would have been hard enough to fight, but two were impossible. Angela had wanted to decide her future for herself, and leaving, choosing a college far from Texas where the Adams' influence didn't reach, had been the only way she'd seen to do it. She'd limited contact to occasional calls, an infrequent email to her computer-literate father. Now, with snow falling in fat, wet clumps and the roads turning into hazardous sheets of ice, she sat in her idled clunker of a car less than a mile from home and wondered if anything else could possibly go wrong. Even as the thought crossed her mind, she glanced quickly heavenward.
"Not that I'm tempting fate, you understand,"
she said wearily.
"But even you have to admit my life basically sucks these days."
She was 22, unmarried, unemployed, and no more than a week or two from delivering a baby. She was virtually back on a doorstep she'd vowed she wouldn't cross again until she'd made something of herself and done it totally on her own, without the Adams' power and influence behind her. If she'd taken one thing away from Texas with her, it had been the fierce Adams pride, the determination to buck everyone and chart her own path. She supposed, in a manner of speaking, that she had. She had made a royal mess of things. No other Adams that she knew of had gone so far astray. She'd skated through college with grades no higher than they had to be. She'd lied about who she was and run away more times and from more places than she could count. Rather than upholding the noble Adams tradition, she'd thumbed her nose at it. Oh, yes, she'd made something of herself all right, but she wasn't especially proud of it, and this was hardly the triumphant homecoming she'd once envisioned. The only thing she had going for her was the absolute certainty that the two people inside would welcome her back with open arms and without making judgments. Luke and Jessie Adams accepted people for who they were, flaws included. That went double for their only child, the daughter they adored. They would be relieved that she'd finally realized that her heart and her identity were all wrapped up with the tight-knit family who'd been patiently waiting for her all this time. As she huddled in the rapidly cooling car, she recalled the oft-told story of the joy with which she'd been welcomed into the world 23 years ago tomorrow. She had been born in the middle of a Texas blizzard, with no one around to assist her mother except Luke Adams, her uncle at the time, and the man who became her father. Luke had been blind drunk that night, but he'd sobered in a hurry when faced with the immediacy of those shattering labor pains. He had risen to the occasion like a true Adams hero. From an early age, Angela understood that they both considered her to be their Christmas blessing, a miracle on a cold and bitter night. With her natural father dead, her birth had brought Luke and Jessie together, helped them to overcome the anguish and guilt they'd felt at having fallen in love